In the shadows of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets had been kept behind stone walls and iron gates, a night security guard named Marcus Thompson made a discovery that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. What began as a routine check of the castle's newly installed digital security system turned into the most dangerous night of his life, when he stumbled upon encrypted communications that revealed Prince George was being used as an unwitting messenger in a plot that reached the highest levels of government. The blinking red light on his security monitor at 2:47 a.m. wasn't supposed to be there. The unauthorized data transmission coming from the children's wing of the castle wasn't supposed to exist. And the coded messages hidden within Prince George's innocent tablet games weren't supposed to be Marcus's problem to solve. But when you're the only person standing between a child prince and those who would exploit him, duty becomes more than just a job. It becomes a matter of life and death, honor and betrayal, in a world where the wrong discovery can make you disappear forever. This is the true story of how one man's dedication to protecting what was right led him into the darkest corners of royal intrigue, where loyalty is tested, trust is shattered, and the innocent become pawns in games they never knew they were playing. Marcus Thompson had been walking the halls of Windsor Castle for 3 years, but he had never seen anything like what appeared on his security monitor that Tuesday night. The digital clock in the corner of his screen read 2:47 a.m. when the first unauthorized signal appeared, a thin red line cutting across the network monitoring display like a wound. He rubbed his eyes, thinking fatigue might be playing tricks on him. The night shifts at Windsor were usually quiet, filled with the gentle sounds of an ancient building settling into sleep. The royal family was in residence, which meant extra precautions. More cameras to monitor, more protocols to follow. But this red line, this signal that wasn't supposed to be there, demanded his immediate attention. Marcus had grown up in Reading, the son of a postal worker and a schoolteacher. His path to royal protection had been unconventional. After serving 6 years in the British Army, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, he had returned home to find civilian life surprisingly difficult. The structured environment of military service had suited him well, and the transition to ordinary employment felt hollow and purposeless. It was his former commanding officer who had suggested palace security work. The pay was decent, the benefits solid, and the sense of duty remained. Marcus had undergone extensive background checks, psychological evaluations, and months of specialized training before he was allowed to set foot inside Windsor Castle. He learned about royal protocols, emergency procedures, and the intricate web of security measures that protected the royal family 24 hours a day. The training had been thorough, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of responsibility he felt each night as he patrolled the corridors where kings and queens had walked for nearly 1,000 years. The castle held layers of history in its stones, and Marcus felt the honor of being entrusted with its protection deeply. His colleagues often joked about the monotony of night security work, but Marcus found peace in the routine. He would begin each shift with a comprehensive check of all systems, walking predetermined routes through the castle's public and private areas, monitoring dozens of security cameras, and maintaining constant communication with the central command post. The digital security upgrade had been implemented just 6 weeks earlier. The castle's ancient walls now housed some of the most sophisticated surveillance and communication equipment in the world. Motion sensors, thermal imaging cameras, encrypted communication networks, and advanced intrusion detection systems created multiple layers of protection around the royal family. Marcus had been one of the first guards to receive training on the new systems. The technology was impressive but complex, requiring guards to monitor not just physical security, but also digital communications and network traffic. The training officer had emphasized the importance of watching for any anomalies, no matter how small they might seem. Now, staring at that red line on his monitor, Marcus felt his training kick in. He pulled up the network analysis screen and began tracing the unauthorized signal. What he found made his stomach tighten with concern. The transmission was originating from within the castle itself, specifically from the residential wing where the royal family's private quarters were located. The signal appeared to be some form of encrypted data transmission, but it wasn't following any of the authorized protocols. All legitimate communications from the royal quarters were supposed to be routed through specific secure channels, monitored and logged by the security system. This transmission was bypassing those channels entirely. Marcus reached for his radio to report the anomaly to Central Command, but something made him pause. His training had taught him to be thorough, to gather as much information as possible before making reports that could trigger major security responses. If he was wrong about this, if there was some legitimate explanation for the signal, he could create unnecessary panic and potentially compromise his position. He decided to investigate further before raising the alarm. Using his security clearance, Marcus accessed the detailed network logs, and began tracking the signal's path through the castle's digital infrastructure. What he discovered sent a chill down his spine. The transmission wasn't just originating from the residential wing, it was specifically coming from the children's quarters where Prince George and his siblings had their private rooms. The implications were staggering. Either someone had infiltrated the most secure area of the castle and was transmitting sensitive information, or someone with authorized access to the children's quarters was involved in unauthorized communications. Neither possibility was acceptable. Marcus's military experience had taught him the value of careful reconnaissance. Before taking any action that might alert potential threats, he needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with. He pulled up the security camera feeds from the children's wing, scanning for any signs of unusual activity. The hallways were empty, bathed in the soft glow of security lighting. The doors to the children's rooms were closed and the motion sensors showed no recent activity. Everything appeared normal on the surface, but that red line on his monitor continued to pulse, indicating ongoing data transmission. Using advanced monitoring tools, Marcus began analyzing the encrypted signal itself. The encryption was sophisticated, military-grade protection that suggested whoever was behind this transmission had significant technical expertise and resources. This wasn't the work of an amateur or opportunistic hacker. It was a professional operation. As he worked to understand the nature of the transmission, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The signal wasn't just sending data out of the castle, it was also receiving information. There was a two-way communication channel established, meaning someone inside the royal quarters was actively exchanging information with an outside party. The weight of this discovery pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. He was potentially looking at evidence of espionage, or worse, conducted from within the most secure location in Britain, targeting the royal family's children. The responsibility of what to do next felt overwhelming. His first instinct was to immediately contact his supervisor and trigger the castle's emergency security protocols. But his military training urged caution. If there was indeed a security breach of this magnitude, moving too quickly could compromise the investigation and potentially put the royal family in greater danger. Marcus made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would continue monitoring the transmission and gathering evidence before alerting the authorities. He would document everything meticulously, ensuring that when he did report this breach, he would have concrete proof of what was happening and who was involved. Over the next hour, Marcus watched the encrypted signals flow back and forth between the children's quarters and an external location. The data packets were too heavily encrypted for him to read their contents, but the pattern of communication suggested regular, ongoing contact rather than a one-time breach. As dawn approached and his shift neared its end, Marcus faced a crucial decision. He could report what he had found to his supervisors and trust that the proper authorities would handle the investigation. Or he could dig deeper on his own, using his unique position and access to uncover the full extent of this security breach. The weight of protecting Prince George and his siblings felt personal to Marcus. During his 3 years at Windsor, he had occasionally seen the children in the corridors, always accompanied by their security details and nannies. They seemed like normal kids despite their extraordinary circumstances, and the thought that someone might be exploiting or endangering them filled him with protective fury. As he prepared to end his shift, Marcus made copies of all the data he had collected, storing them on an encrypted drive he kept for personal use. Whatever was happening in the children's quarters, whoever was behind these unauthorized transmissions, he was going to find out. And he was going to stop them, no matter what it cost him personally. The morning shift guards began arriving as Marcus completed his final security checks. He exchanged pleasantries with his replacement, maintaining the appearance of a normal night's work while his mind raced with the implications of his discovery. As he walked to his car in the staff parking area, Marcus knew that everything had changed. He was no longer just a security guard doing his job. He had become an investigator pursuing evidence of a potential threat to the royal family. The comfortable routine of his work life had been shattered by those pulsing red lines on his monitor, and there would be no going back to the simple days of routine patrols and quiet nights. Driving home through the early morning streets of Windsor, Marcus began planning his next move. He would need to be careful, methodical, and completely discreet. If he was right about what he had discovered, the people behind this breach would be dangerous and well-connected. If he was wrong, his career and possibly his freedom could be destroyed. But as he thought about Prince George and his siblings sleeping peacefully in their beds while unknown threats surrounded them, Marcus knew he had no choice. He would follow this investigation wherever it led, no matter the personal cost. The protection of those children had become more than his job, it had become his mission. Marcus spent the following day in restless preparation, unable to shake the images of those encrypted signals from his mind. His small flat in Windsor Town Centre felt cramped and suffocating as he paced between his computer desk and the kitchen, drinking coffee and reviewing the data he had collected from the previous night. The encrypted files seemed impenetrable, but Marcus had learned basic digital forensics during his military service. He began running analysis programs on the signal patterns, looking for any clues about their origin, destination, or content. The work was painstaking and technical, far removed from his usual security duties, but his determination drove him forward. As evening approached and time for his next shift drew near, Marcus felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. He had spent hours researching encryption methods and communication protocols, trying to understand what he was dealing with. The sophistication of the signals suggested involvement by someone with serious technical knowledge and resources, possibly foreign intelligence services, or organized criminal groups. The thought that such threats might be operating within Windsor Castle, potentially targeting Prince George and his siblings, filled Marcus with cold anger. These children represented the future of the monarchy, and their safety was paramount to national security. Whatever was happening, he was determined to expose it. Returning to work that evening, Marcus maintained his usual professional demeanor while concealing the intense focus of his real investigation. He greeted his colleagues normally, received his routine briefings, and began his patrol routes as scheduled. But every step was now part of a larger mission to protect the royal children from an unknown threat. The first few hours of his shift passed without incident. Marcus monitored the standard security feeds, conducted his regular checks, and maintained normal radio contact with Central Command. But as the castle settled into its nighttime quiet, he began his real work. At 11:30 p.m., Marcus positioned himself at the main security monitoring station and began watching for any signs of the unauthorized transmissions. The children's quarters appeared peaceful on the camera feeds, with no visible activity in the hallways or common areas. But at exactly midnight, the first red signal appeared on his network monitor. This time, Marcus was ready. He had prepared specialized monitoring software that would allow him to track the signals more precisely and gather detailed information about their characteristics. As the encrypted data began flowing, he captured everything, building a comprehensive record of the communication patterns. What he discovered over the next hour shocked him. The transmissions were not random or sporadic. They followed a precise schedule, occurring at specific times and lasting for predetermined durations. This level of organization suggested a well-planned operation with established protocols and procedures. More disturbing still, Marcus began to detect multiple transmission sources within the children's quarters. It wasn't just one device sending unauthorized signals. There were at least 3 separate sources, all communicating with external contacts simultaneously. This indicated a network of compromised devices rather than a single security breach. As Marcus worked to map the network of unauthorized communications, he made a discovery that changed everything. One of the signal sources appeared to be coming from a device registered to Prince George himself. According to the security database, the signal was originating from an educational tablet that had been provided to the young prince for his studies. The implications were staggering. Either Prince George was somehow involved in espionage activities, which was impossible given his age, or someone was using his device without his knowledge to conduct unauthorized communications. The more likely scenario was that the prince's tablet had been compromised, turning an innocent educational tool into a conduit for sensitive information. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger as he realized how the young prince was being exploited. Prince George was just a child, unaware that his tablet was being used as a tool in what appeared to be a sophisticated intelligence operation. The violation of the boy's innocence and security filled Marcus with determination to expose and stop whoever was responsible. Working carefully to avoid detection, Marcus began analyzing the specific signals coming from Prince George's tablet. The device was both sending and receiving data, suggesting active two-way communication with an external party. The timing of these communications coincided with periods when the prince would typically be using his tablet for games or educational activities. This discovery revealed the diabolical nature of the operation. Whoever had compromised the device had done so in a way that allowed them to piggyback their communications on the prince's normal usage patterns. When Prince George played games or completed educational exercises, unauthorized data was simultaneously being transmitted to unknown recipients. Marcus realized he needed to understand exactly what information was being transmitted. If the communications contained details about the royal family schedules, security procedures, or personal information, the implications for national security could be enormous. Foreign intelligence services would pay enormous sums for such access to the British royal family. Using advanced signal analysis tools, Marcus began attempting to break down the encryption protecting the transmitted data. The work was complex and time-consuming, requiring him to run various decryption algorithms while simultaneously monitoring for any changes in the communication patterns. As he worked, Marcus noticed something that made him increasingly uneasy. The signals from Prince George's tablet were not just transmitting data, they were also receiving what appeared to be instructions or updates. This suggested that whoever was controlling the compromised device could potentially influence what the prince saw on his screen or how his applications behaved. The possibility that unknown parties might be able to manipulate Prince George's educational content or gaming experiences was deeply troubling. Beyond the security implications, there were serious concerns about the psychological impact on a child who was being unknowingly manipulated through his personal devices. Around 3 a.m., Marcus achieved a partial breakthrough in his analysis. While he couldn't fully decrypt the transmitted data, he was able to identify certain patterns and markers within the signals that revealed crucial information about their nature and purpose. The communications appeared to include regularly updated location data, schedule information, and what looked like behavioral patterns. Someone was using Prince George's tablet to monitor and report on the royal family's daily activities, movements, and routines. This information would be invaluable to anyone planning to harm or exploit the royal family. Marcus also discovered evidence that the compromised tablet was being used to map the castle's internal network infrastructure. The device was systematically probing other connected systems, gathering information about security protocols, communication channels, and access controls. This suggested a much larger operation aimed at compromising the entire Windsor Castle security network. The scope of what Marcus had uncovered was beyond anything he had imagined. This wasn't just a simple security breach. It was a comprehensive intelligence operation targeting the royal family and the security infrastructure protecting them. The use of Prince George's tablet was just one component of a larger network designed to gather sensitive information and potentially facilitate more serious threats. As his shift approached its end, Marcus faced a critical decision about how to proceed. The evidence he had gathered clearly demonstrated a serious threat to national security and the safety of the royal family. Standard protocol demanded immediate reporting to his supervisors and the relevant security agencies. But Marcus also recognized that the sophistication and scope of this operation suggested involvement by individuals with significant resources and connections. If the threat came from within the royal household staff, security services, or government agencies, reporting through normal channels might compromise the investigation or put him in personal danger. His military experience had taught him the value of establishing secure communication channels and protecting critical intelligence until it could be safely delivered to trusted authorities. Marcus decided he needed to gather more evidence and identify trustworthy contacts before making his report. Over the remaining hours of his shift, Marcus documented everything he had discovered, creating detailed records of the unauthorized communications, their timing, sources, and characteristics. He also began researching the security clearances and backgrounds of various personnel who had access to the children's quarters, looking for potential suspects or security vulnerabilities. As dawn broke and his replacement arrived, Marcus maintained his professional facade while his mind raced with the implications of his discoveries. He had uncovered evidence of a serious threat to Prince George and the royal family, but he was now walking a dangerous path that could put his own safety at risk. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever as Marcus left Windsor Castle that morning. He carried with him not just evidence of criminal activity, but knowledge that could affect the safety of the royal children and the security of the nation. The comfortable anonymity of his security guard position had been replaced by the burden of protecting secrets that could change everything. Driving home through the morning traffic, Marcus began planning his next steps. He would need to be more careful than ever, gathering evidence while avoiding detection by whoever was behind this operation. The stakes had risen dramatically, and he knew that one wrong move could have devastating consequences for both himself and the royal family he was sworn to protect. The breakthrough came on Marcus's fifth night of investigation, when a software glitch in the castle's security system provided him with an unexpected opportunity. At 1:15 a.m., during a routine system update, the network monitoring display showed a brief window where some of the encrypted communications were transmitted in a partially unprotected format. Marcus was ready for this possibility. He had spent his days off researching encryption vulnerabilities and preparing specialized software that could capture and analyze data during these brief security lapses. When the window opened, he managed to intercept several data packets before the system's encryption protocols fully re-engaged. What he found in those intercepted communications made his blood run cold. The partially decoded messages contain detailed schedules of Prince George's daily activities, including private tutoring sessions, family meals, and recreation time. Someone was receiving real-time intelligence about the young prince's movements and routines. Even more disturbing, the communications included behavioral analysis reports describing Prince George's reactions to various situations, his preferences, fears, and emotional responses. This level of detailed personal information suggested that someone with intimate access to the child was systematically documenting and reporting his private life. Marcus realized that whoever was behind this operation wasn't just gathering intelligence for espionage purposes. The detailed behavioral analysis and emotional profiling suggested something far more sinister. This was the kind of information that would be valuable to someone planning to manipulate, exploit, or harm the young prince directly. The intercepted data also revealed the identity of the external recipient of these communications. The signals were being transmitted to a location in central London, specifically to an address in the financial district that housed several international consulting firms and private intelligence companies. Marcus used his personal time to research the London address, discovering that it was home to Meridian Strategic Solutions, a private intelligence firm that claimed to provide security consulting services to high-net-worth individuals and corporations. On the surface, Meridian appeared to be a legitimate business, but deeper investigation revealed concerning connections to foreign entities and questionable past activities. The company's client list was confidential, but Marcus found references to contracts with organizations that had adversarial relationships with British interests. Meridian had been investigated several times by British intelligence services, though no formal charges had ever been filed. This discovery provided Marcus with crucial context for understanding the threat he had uncovered. The unauthorized communications from Prince George's tablet were feeding intelligence about the royal family to a private company with questionable loyalties and foreign connections. The implications for national security were enormous, but Marcus still needed to identify who within Windsor Castle was facilitating these communications. Someone with regular access to Prince George and his personal devices was actively participating in this intelligence operation, betraying their position of trust to exploit a young child for financial or political gain. His investigation took on new urgency as Marcus realized that the threat was both external and internal. Not only were foreign entities gaining access to sensitive royal family intelligence, but someone within the castle's inner circle was actively facilitating this access. During his next shift, Marcus focused on identifying potential suspects among the staff who had regular access to the children's quarters. The list was surprisingly short, limited to a small number of trusted individuals who had undergone extensive background checks and security clearances. Among the suspects were Prince George's personal tutors, several members of the household staff responsible for maintaining the children's quarters, technical support personnel who serviced the educational tablets and other devices, and a few senior security personnel who had administrative access to all castle systems. Marcus began discreetly observing these individuals during his patrol routes, looking for any suspicious behavior or unusual patterns in their activities. He also started monitoring their digital activities more closely, watching for any connections to the unauthorized communication network he had discovered. The answer came from an unexpected source. While reviewing security camera footage from the previous week, Marcus noticed something that had been overlooked during routine monitoring. One of Prince George's tutors, Sarah Mitchell, had been spending unusual amounts of time alone with the prince's tablet during their sessions. Sarah had been working at Windsor Castle for 18 months, having been hired after completing advanced degrees in childhood education and child psychology. Her background check had been thorough, revealing an exemplary academic record and glowing recommendations from previous employers. But as Marcus investigated further, he discovered troubling gaps in Sarah's background that had somehow been missed during her vetting process. Her previous employment history included a brief period working for an educational consulting firm that had undisclosed connections to Meridian Strategic Solutions. The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place as Marcus realized that Sarah's hiring at Windsor Castle had not been coincidental. She had been carefully placed in a position where she would have intimate access to Prince George, allowing her to gather intelligence and facilitate the compromise of his personal devices. Marcus spent several nights observing Sarah's interactions with Prince George's tablet during their tutoring sessions. Using advanced surveillance equipment, he was able to detect that Sarah was installing unauthorized software on the device while appearing to conduct normal educational activities. The software she installed was sophisticated spyware that could monitor all of Prince George's activities on the tablet, record his conversations, track his location within the castle, and transmit this information to external recipients. The spyware was designed to be completely invisible to both the child user and standard security scans. Even more disturbing, Marcus discovered that Sarah was using psychological manipulation techniques during her tutoring sessions to gather additional intelligence about the royal family. She would ask Prince George seemingly innocent questions about his family's activities, schedules, and conversations, then document his responses for transmission to her handlers. The violation of the young prince's trust and privacy filled Marcus with anger and determination. Sarah Mitchell was not just committing espionage. She was psychologically exploiting a child, using her position as an educator to manipulate and extract information from him. Marcus realized he now had enough evidence to expose the entire operation, but he also understood the delicacy of the situation. Sarah's position within the royal household meant that any investigation would need to be handled with extreme care to avoid compromising Prince George's safety or creating a public scandal. He began documenting everything he had discovered, creating a comprehensive file that detailed the unauthorized communications, Sarah's involvement, the connection to Meridian Strategic Solutions, and the specific ways Prince George's tablet had been compromised. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. But as Marcus prepared to report his findings, he made one final discovery that changed everything. While monitoring the communication network one night, he detected an emergency signal that appeared to indicate an imminent threat to Prince George's safety. The message, partially decoded during another brief security lapse, seemed to reference a planned extraction operation that would occur within the next 48 hours. The details were unclear, but the timing and context suggested that someone was planning to use the intelligence gathered about Prince George to facilitate his kidnapping, or worse. Marcus realized that the espionage operation he had been investigating was not an end in itself, but preparation for a much more serious crime. The detailed behavioral analysis, schedule information, and security intelligence had all been gathered to support a planned attack on the young prince. The urgency of the situation demanded immediate action, but Marcus also recognized that moving too quickly could trigger the attack or allow the conspirators to escape. He needed to alert the authorities while simultaneously ensuring Prince George's continued safety until the threat could be neutralized. As his shift ended that morning, Marcus made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He could no longer work alone to investigate this threat. The safety of Prince George required the full resources of the British security services, even if reporting his discoveries put his own position and safety at risk. But first, he needed to ensure that Prince George would be protected during the critical hours while the authorities mobilized their response. Marcus began planning how he could subtly increase security around the young prince without alerting the conspirators that their operation had been discovered. The next 24 hours would determine whether Marcus's investigation had uncovered the threat in time to prevent a tragedy, or whether his discoveries had come too late to save the young prince from those who would exploit his innocence for their own dark purposes. Walking to his car that morning, Marcus felt the full weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a security guard who had stumbled across suspicious activity. He had become the primary barrier between Prince George and those who would harm him, and failure was not an option. The morning of March 15th marked a turning point in Marcus Thompson's investigation that would test every skill he had learned in the military and every instinct he had developed as a security professional. As he sat in his flat reviewing the evidence he had gathered, Marcus knew that time was running out to prevent what appeared to be an imminent threat to Prince George's safety. The emergency signal he had intercepted the previous night continued to haunt him. The reference to an extraction operation suggested that someone was planning to remove Prince George from Windsor Castle, possibly as part of a kidnapping attempt. The sophisticated intelligence gathering that had been conducted over several months suddenly made perfect sense as preparation for such an operation. Marcus had spent the early morning hours researching similar cases involving threats to high-profile children. The patterns were disturbing but clear. Extended surveillance and intelligence gathering, followed by carefully planned extraction attempts that exploited the target's routines and psychological vulnerabilities. The involvement of Sarah Mitchell added another layer of complexity to the threat. As Prince George's tutor, she had intimate knowledge of his daily schedule, emotional state, and trust relationships. If she was indeed working with the extraction team, she would be in a perfect position to facilitate their operation by manipulating the prince's movements or psychological responses. Marcus realized he needed to act immediately, but he also understood that revealing his investigation prematurely could trigger the extraction attempt or allow the conspirators to escape without facing justice. He needed a strategy that would protect Prince George while simultaneously exposing the full scope of the threat. His first step was to ensure that reliable authorities were alerted to the danger. Marcus had identified Detective Chief Inspector Helen Crawford, of the Metropolitan Police's Special Protection Unit as someone with both the authority and expertise to handle this type of threat. Crawford had an exemplary record investigating crimes against high-profile individuals and had previously worked on cases involving the royal family. Marcus prepared a comprehensive briefing package containing all the evidence he had gathered: recordings of the unauthorized communications, analysis of the encryption patterns, documentation of Sarah Mitchell's suspicious activities, and intelligence about Meridian Strategic Solutions. The package was organized to allow Crawford to quickly understand the scope and urgency of the threat. However, Marcus also recognized that formal law enforcement channels would take time to mobilize, and Prince George needed immediate protection. He decided to implement his own discreet security measures while waiting for official intervention. Using his access to Windsor Castle's security systems, Marcus began subtly adjusting camera angles and patrol routes to provide enhanced surveillance of the children's quarters without alerting anyone to his activities. He also identified several points where additional security measures could be discreetly implemented without disrupting the royal family's normal routines. The most challenging aspect of his protection plan was ensuring Prince George's safety during his tutoring sessions with Sarah Mitchell. Marcus couldn't prevent these sessions without revealing his investigation, but he needed to ensure that Sarah couldn't use them to facilitate the extraction attempt. Marcus developed a plan to position himself in locations where he could monitor the tutoring sessions, while appearing to conduct routine security patrols. He also prepared emergency response procedures that would allow him to intervene immediately if Sarah attempted to remove Prince George from the castle or place him in danger. As Marcus returned to Windsor Castle for what he knew could be his most important shift, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. He was potentially the only barrier between Prince George and those who would exploit or harm him, and failure could have devastating consequences for the young prince and the monarchy itself. The evening began normally, with Marcus conducting his standard security briefings and beginning his patrol routes. But every action was now part of his larger mission to protect Prince George from the imminent threat he had discovered. At 8:30 p.m., Marcus positioned himself near the children's quarters as Prince George's evening tutoring session with Sarah Mitchell began. Using concealed surveillance equipment, he monitored their interaction while appearing to conduct routine security checks in the adjacent corridors. What he observed during that session confirmed his worst fears about Sarah's intentions. While appearing to conduct normal educational activities, Sarah was actually implementing psychological manipulation techniques designed to make Prince George more compliant and trusting. She was systematically breaking down his natural wariness and preparing him to follow her instructions without question. Marcus watched in growing anger as Sarah used her position of authority and trust to manipulate the young prince's emotions and responses. She was not just gathering intelligence. She was actively preparing Prince George for the extraction attempt by ensuring he would comply with her directions when the time came. The session also revealed additional details about the planned operation. Through careful observation of Sarah's behavior and equipment, Marcus was able to identify several communication devices she was using to coordinate with external parties. The timing and pattern of her activity suggested that the extraction attempt was planned for the following evening. As the tutoring session ended and Prince George returned to his quarters, Marcus made the difficult decision to accelerate his timeline for alerting the authorities. The evidence of Sarah's manipulation activities provided the final proof needed to demonstrate the immediate danger facing the young prince. Marcus contacted Detective Chief Inspector Crawford through secure communication channels, providing her with an urgent briefing on the threat and requesting immediate intervention. Crawford's response was swift and professional. She assured Marcus that specialized units would be mobilized within hours to address the situation. However, Crawford also emphasized the need for absolute discretion during the critical period before the intervention teams could be deployed. Any action that alerted the conspirators to the investigation could trigger the extraction attempt or endanger Prince George's safety. This created a delicate balance for Marcus as he continued his shift. He needed to maintain normal appearances while simultaneously implementing enhanced protection measures for Prince George. Every decision carried potentially life-threatening consequences for the young prince he was sworn to protect. Around midnight, Marcus detected increased communication activity within the unauthorized network he had been monitoring. The signals suggested that final preparations were being made for the extraction operation, with coordination occurring between Sarah Mitchell, external operatives, and unknown parties outside the United Kingdom. The communications revealed that the extraction team planned to exploit a carefully orchestrated distraction to remove Prince George from the castle during his scheduled outdoor activities the following afternoon. Sarah would ensure that the prince was in the designated location at the specified time, while external operatives would handle the actual removal operation. Marcus realized that he had less than 18 hours to ensure that the intervention teams were in position to prevent the extraction attempt. He provided Crawford with updated intelligence about the timing and location of the planned operation, allowing the authorities to prepare their own counter-operation. As dawn approached and his shift neared its end, Marcus felt the tension of the approaching confrontation. Everything he had worked for over the past weeks would be tested in the next few hours, as the authorities moved to arrest the conspirators and protect Prince George from those who would exploit his innocence. The weight of what he had accomplished began to sink in as Marcus prepared to hand over his investigation to the proper authorities. He had uncovered a sophisticated intelligence operation targeting the royal family, identified the specific threat to Prince George's safety, and provided the evidence needed to prevent a potential kidnapping attempt. But Marcus also understood that his role in this investigation was far from over. As the only person who fully understood the scope and complexity of the threat, he would be called upon to assist in the arrests, testify in any resulting legal proceedings, and help ensure that all aspects of the conspiracy were fully exposed. Walking to his car that final morning of the investigation, Marcus felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and continued concern. While the immediate threat to Prince George would soon be neutralized, the larger questions about how such a sophisticated operation had been able to penetrate Windsor Castle's security would require months of additional investigation and security reforms. The young prince who had unknowingly been at the center of this conspiracy would soon be safe, but the experience had taught Marcus that the threats facing the royal family were more complex and dangerous than he had ever imagined. His role as a protector had evolved from routine security work to active counterintelligence operations, and there would be no returning to the simple days of quiet night patrols. As he drove home through the morning streets of Windsor, Marcus knew that the next 24 hours would determine whether his investigation had succeeded in protecting Prince George, or whether the conspirators would find a way to complete their operation despite his efforts to stop them. The final confrontation unfolded with the precision and intensity that Marcus had experienced during military operations, but with stakes that felt far more personal and immediate. Detective Chief Inspector Helen Crawford's specialized unit had positioned themselves throughout Windsor Castle during the early morning hours, creating an invisible net around the conspirators while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. Marcus found himself at the center of the operation, serving as the primary intelligence source for the intervention team while continuing his regular security duties to avoid alerting Sarah Mitchell and her associates. The delicate balance required him to provide real-time updates about the conspirators' activities while appearing to conduct routine patrol duties. At 10:30 a.m., as Prince George began his scheduled educational activities, Marcus observed Sarah Mitchell implementing what appeared to be the final preparation phase of her operation. She was systematically testing the prince's compliance with her instructions, ensuring that he would follow her directions without question when the extraction attempt began. The psychological manipulation was subtle but effective, using educational games and exercises to reinforce patterns of obedience and trust. Sarah was not just preparing Prince George for the immediate extraction, she was conditioning him to be compliant during whatever ordeal would follow his removal from the castle. Marcus communicated these observations to the intervention team, who were positioned strategically throughout the castle to monitor all potential escape routes and communication channels. The operation required perfect timing to ensure Prince George's safety while preventing the conspirators from escaping or destroying evidence of their activities. At 1:15 p.m., the extraction attempt began exactly as Marcus had predicted. Sarah Mitchell initiated what appeared to be a routine outdoor educational activity, guiding Prince George toward the castle's east gardens, where the external operatives were positioned to intercept them. The young prince followed his tutor willingly, unaware that he was being led into a carefully orchestrated kidnapping attempt. His trust in Sarah was complete, making him vulnerable to her manipulation and exploitation. Marcus, positioned with the intervention team, watched as Sarah guided Prince George away from the standard security protocols and toward the predetermined extraction point. Every step brought the prince closer to danger, but the intervention team needed to wait until the external operatives revealed themselves before moving to make arrests. The tension was almost unbearable, as Marcus watched Prince George walking innocently toward what his captors intended to be his last moments of freedom. The young prince was chattering happily about the educational activity Sarah had planned, completely unaware of the conspiracy surrounding him. At 1:45 p.m., the external operatives made their move. A van approached the east gate of the castle grounds, while two men, dressed as maintenance workers, positioned themselves near the extraction point. The coordination was professional and well-rehearsed, suggesting extensive planning and preparation. Sarah Mitchell began the final phase of her operation, leading Prince George toward a secluded area where the extraction could occur without immediate detection. She continued to maintain the pretense of educational activity while systematically removing the prince from the protection of the castle's security systems. Detective Chief Inspector Crawford gave the signal for intervention at 1:52 p.m., just as the external operatives moved to intercept Prince George. Specialized armed units emerged from concealment throughout the castle grounds, surrounding both Sarah Mitchell and the extraction team before they could complete their operation. The arrests were swift and decisive. Sarah Mitchell was taken into custody while still attempting to maintain her cover as an innocent tutor, claiming that she was simply conducting scheduled outdoor activities with Prince George. The external operatives were apprehended before they could reach the extraction point, preventing any direct contact with the prince. Prince George's reaction to the sudden appearance of armed officers was initially one of confusion and fear. The young prince could not understand why his trusted tutor was being arrested, or why so many serious-faced adults had suddenly surrounded them. His innocence made the betrayal of his trust even more poignant. Marcus, working with child psychology specialists, helped to gently explain to Prince George that there had been a serious security concern that required immediate attention. They emphasized that he was safe and that the adults around him were working to protect him, without revealing the full extent of the threat he had faced. The immediate crisis was resolved, but the investigation was far from complete. The arrests of Sarah Mitchell and the extraction team provided access to a wealth of evidence about the broader conspiracy, including communications with Meridian Strategic Solutions and potentially other foreign entities. Under interrogation, Sarah Mitchell initially maintained her cover story, claiming that her activities at Windsor Castle had been entirely legitimate and educational in nature. However, the overwhelming evidence Marcus had gathered made her denials impossible to sustain. The forensic analysis of Prince George's tablet revealed the full extent of the surveillance and intelligence gathering that had been conducted over several months. The device contained sophisticated spyware that had been monitoring and recording the prince's activities, conversations, and movements throughout the castle. Even more disturbing was the discovery of psychological profiling data that had been compiled about Prince George, documenting his fears, preferences, behavioral patterns, and emotional vulnerabilities. This information had clearly been intended to facilitate his manipulation and control during and after the planned extraction. The investigation into Meridian Strategic Solutions revealed connections to foreign intelligence services and other entities with adversarial relationships to British interests. The operation targeting Prince George appeared to be part of a larger effort to gather intelligence about the royal family and potentially influence British political decisions. Marcus found himself at the center of the resulting investigation, providing detailed testimony about his discoveries and the evidence he had gathered. His methodical documentation and careful analysis had provided the foundation for exposing the entire conspiracy. The legal proceedings that followed were conducted with extraordinary security measures to protect sensitive information about royal family security procedures and intelligence methods. Sarah Mitchell eventually pled guilty to charges of espionage, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping, receiving a substantial prison sentence. The external operatives were revealed to be professional criminals with connections to international human trafficking networks. Their intended fate for Prince George, had the extraction succeeded, remained unclear but was clearly sinister given their criminal backgrounds. For Marcus Thompson, the successful resolution of the case marked a dramatic transformation in his role and responsibilities. His exceptional detective work and dedication to protecting Prince George had been recognized at the highest levels of British security services. He was offered a position with the Metropolitan Police's Special Protection Unit, working directly on cases involving threats to high-profile individuals and national security interests. The role represented a significant advancement in his career and recognition of his unique skills and dedication. Prince George, fortunately, appeared to recover quickly from the trauma of the attempted kidnapping. Child psychology specialists worked with him to process the experience in age-appropriate ways, emphasizing his safety and the fact that the adults around him had successfully protected him from harm. The security reforms implemented at Windsor Castle following the investigation were extensive and comprehensive. New protocols were established for vetting staff members, monitoring communication devices, and detecting unauthorized network activity. The castle's digital security systems were completely overhauled to prevent similar infiltrations. Marcus remained involved in the ongoing security enhancements, serving as a consultant on the integration of human intelligence gathering with advanced digital monitoring systems. His unique experience bridging traditional security work with modern counterintelligence techniques made him invaluable to the reform efforts. The broader investigation into Meridian Strategic Solutions and its foreign connections continued for months, revealing a complex web of international espionage activities targeting British institutions and interests. Marcus's discovery at Windsor Castle had exposed just one component of a much larger threat to national security. As the dust settled from the immediate crisis, Marcus reflected on how a routine night patrol had led him into the most significant investigation of his life. His decision to pursue those strange signals on his security monitor had potentially saved Prince George from kidnapping, or worse, while exposing a sophisticated threat to the royal family. The experience had taught him that the most important security threats often came not from dramatic external attacks, but from subtle internal betrayals by individuals who had gained positions of trust. Sarah Mitchell's ability to exploit her role as an educator to gather intelligence and manipulate Prince George demonstrated the vulnerability of even the most secure environments to human deception. Prince George would grow up with enhanced security measures and awareness, but hopefully without lasting trauma from his brush with those who would have exploited his innocence for their own dark purposes. The young prince's safety had been preserved through the dedication of individuals like Marcus, who took their protective responsibilities seriously, even when it required extraordinary personal risk and sacrifice. The quiet corridors of Windsor Castle returned to their normal routines, but Marcus knew that the vigilance required to protect the royal family would never be routine again. The threats were evolving, becoming more sophisticated and insidious, requiring constant adaptation and improvement in security measures and awareness. As Marcus walked through those same corridors in his new role, he carried with him the knowledge that his dedication to protecting Prince George had made a real difference. The young prince was safe, the conspiracy had been exposed, and the threats to the royal family were better understood and prepared for. It was, Marcus reflected, exactly the kind of meaningful service he had hoped to provide when he first accepted his position as a Windsor Castle security guard.